We told them not to wake us, not unless it was extinction, and then they lit the beacon. The galaxy's outer rim had gone dark for 17 standard cycles. No signals, no trade, no patrols. Civilizations that once flickered like distant stars had vanished from the nav charts one by one, but no one called the Deathworlders. Not until now. The SOS burst across the void like a scream through silence. Ancient coding. Priority 1. Direct to Terran space. The signal was clear. Alien origin. Unfamiliar language. Imminent annihilation. Non-human request for Deathworlder assistance. Emergency override. Full response. It reached the Argnan hub orbiting Proxima Centauri, where the last human warship slept, and they woke up. He stood alone on the decayed deck of the TSV Halberd, staring out at the dying blue of a nearby gas giant. Commander Idris Harlan, last appointed Field Marshal of the Terran Unified Vanguard, hadn't seen a real sky in 18 years, the ship grown with age and memory. Scorch marks still traced its hull from the siege of Orionix. In the quiet, its bones whispered stories of 10,000 fallen. Harlan had memorized every one. He rubbed the long, faded scar beneath his collar, a gift from the Zadrothi hive. Queen during Earth's final hour. It didn't hurt anymore. Nothing did. A mechanical voice chirped at his back. Command authorization confirmed. Emergency broadcast authentic. Global protocol Rs-1 activated. A pause. Full military response sanctioned. Harlan exhaled. Wake the fleet. Humanity was not what it once was. After the Earthfall, when the coalition of galactic races decided the humans were too dangerous to be left unchecked, they tried to wipe them out. The irony was, the humans agreed. Their own scientists had warned them. Biologically extreme, socially unpredictable, mentally unstable under stress, a species evolved on a death world, built to endure what no others could survive. After the glassing of Earth, the remnants fled. 4,000 ships scattered, only 100 returned. But the ones who came back didn't break. They vanished into the deep dark, built ghost fleets, seeded whisper colonies, and swore, no more wars unless called. The last Terran law etched into their command cores. Read, if the galaxy bleeds and calls for help, then we answer, and we finish it. The Halberd drifted forward like a forgotten god. Cold, armored hull, gravity-bent rail cannons, 10 kilometers of black steel bristling with kinetic wrath. Her sister ships ignited across the void, the Sorrow, the Bastion, the Ash of Dawn. One by one, their cores roared to life, reactors shedding light that hadn't touched their hulls in decades. They hadn't been built to patrol, they hadn't been built to defend. They'd been built to end things. Across the ship's bridge, officers took positions. Most were veterans of the collapse. All wore the black and silver of the Terran Vanguard. Their eyes were quiet, steady, ready. Where did the signal come from? Harlan asked, voice low. Triangulated to the Delta Vexus expanse, replied a young nav officer, skin inked with battle litanies, sector previously charted as peaceful. Nearest known sentient species, the Threnai, civilized, non-hostile. They had cities, murmured Commander Alarakan, stepping beside him. Her gaze was sharp, haunted. Music, culture. They honored their dead with starlight, and now they're the ones calling us. Harlan said. He turned toward the hologlobe. The signal replayed again, a garbled, desperate burst of alien language. But one word had translated clean, help, then silence. Later, in the combat prep chambers, Harlan donned the old armor, not the ceremonial kind, the real plates, black obsidian weave, scarred from plasma and shrapnel. On the left gauntlet, the names of 12 fallen brothers. On the right, a blade etched into steel, resolve. Alara stood beside him, latching her own chest plate. Her voice was low, almost reverent. Do you think they know what they've done? They're afraid. He said simply, afraid enough to break the silence. And we respond to fear. No. Harlan's voice turned to steel. We respond to need. In orbit above Proxima, the Deathworlders Armada aligned. 28 warships, 2 dreadnoughts. No diplomats, no warning shots. As the Halberd prepared to burn toward the Delta Vexus expanse, the signal repeated one last time. This time, a new phrase cut through the static. They are consuming us. Please, send your monsters. Harlan closed his eyes. Monsters? No, just humans. And for the first time in 20 years, his lips moved with the ancient rally. Soul bows to none. By the time we arrived, They weren't screaming anymore, just silence. To clean. Too late. The Delta Vexus expanse should have been bright. 17 habitable systems, 5 thriving cultures, and 1 peacekeeping archive. Stations shared across the cluster. But when the Terran fleet entered the outer rim of the sector, they found only ruin, no signals, no debris, no life. Commander Idris Harlan stood at the Halbert's primary viewport, watching the ghost of a world spiral into its sun. Gravity collapsed, oceans vaporized. A Threnai homeworld, once lush with sky temples and crystalline towers, now reduced to cinders, skin again. Harlan said quietly. The sensor tech shook her head. Same as the last 3. No energy signatures, no bodies, no wreckage. It's like they were never here. No screams, no defenses, no trace of war. But that was the thing. War left scars. This left nothing. It was worse than genocide. It was extraction. Further in, they found the first remains. A Threnai shuttle, adrift, power drained. It had drifted blind through the system for weeks, hull nearly frozen solid. The Marines retrieved its black box, a crystalline memory core, alien tech, delicate and fractal. They uploaded it into the Halbert's translator grid. The bridge fell silent. A flickering hologram appeared, a Threnai child, eyes bioluminescent, skin translucent violet, trembling beneath a trembling sky. Behind her, towers collapsing, light ripped from the horizon like someone had turned off the stars. She whispered one phrase, again and again. The sky ate them, and then it ended. Alara Ken turned to Harlan. They're being harvested. Who the hell does that? Someone whispered. No one answered. But something inside Harlan stirred. Not anger. Not yet. Memory. The same silence had crept over Earth's moon just before the Coalition burned Earth. First, the dark, then the light. He clenched his jaw. Prep a scout wing. He ordered. Take us deeper. Let's find out what did this. It didn't take long. A week into the expanse, near the neutron shrouds of Vexus Prime, the Halbert's long-range scans pinged movement. It wasn't a ship. It was a structure. A massive one. Spanning hundreds of kilometers, partially cloaked in spatial distortions, it looked like a broken, orbiting fortress, but not built. It looked grown, its surface twisted with dark ridges, bone-like lattices, and organic appendages. No hails, no response, no emissions, just slow, deliberate pulses from the central core, feeding on the star beneath it. Ken's voice dropped. It's leaching stellar mass, not just power, matter. One of the science officers added, and anything near the star goes with it. Planets, moons, colonies. It clicked. This wasn't just conquest. It was consumption. The Death Worlders had seen planet killers before. Coalition superweapons, AI-Seek ships, gravitational bombs. But this was worse. This thing didn't fire. It absorbed. Then, they saw them. Small vessels, dark and spindle-like, drifting away from the Leviathan, shaped like arrows, completely silent. No energy trails, no crew, but moving with precision and purpose. One of them changed course and came directly toward the Halberd. Combat stations blared. The Halberd's guns rotated, auto-targeting primed. On the forward deck, the Terran Marines braced, not in fear, but in ritual. One by one, they gripped the steel chains welded along the walls, muttering oaths not to gods, but to the fallen. Object approaching, velocity increasing. The enemy drone, or whatever it was, didn't open comms. It didn't fire weapons. It simply unfolded, like a mechanical flower, and released sound. Not a scream, a hum, ancient, low frequency. It vibrated the bones. Some crew staggered, bleeding from the nose and ears. Systems flickered. Screens glitched. Ken grabbed a railing, shouting, "There!" Using harmonics, data through resonance. "It's a message. Translate it." Harlan barked. The AI stammered. No language detected, only pattern, repeating tone. The hum deepened. Then the message appeared, burned into every screen on the bridge. Written in shifting Terran glyphs, "Do not interfere. This sector is claimed. Harvest in progress." The humming stopped. The vessel exploded, but not with fire, with data. A viral storm of code, trying to flood the Halberd systems. Firewalls flared, backups isolated. The lights went out for 3 seconds. When they returned, a single word pulsed on every terminal. "Leave." Silence again. The fleet rayformed. Dreadnoughts aligned in full battle array. A message went out to all ships. Non-biological threat confirmed. Harlan said across the fleet net. Possible AI hive origin. Behavior. Viral. Assimilative. Current mission parameters unchanged. Ken stepped beside him. You know what this means. He nodded. They're not just killing planets. They're harvesting civilizations, and we're next if we run. She looked at him. Then we don't. He turned to the crew, voice rising. Prep a strike team. No more scouting. We're going in. If they want us to leave, he drew the blade etched into his gauntlet. They're going to have to kill us first. Above Vexus, the Leviathan stirred. It sensed them now. A memory, a mistake. The humans had returned. They didn't expect us to fight for someone else's dead. That's how you know they never understood humans. The strike team launched under the dark belly of Vexus Prime's gravity well. No fanfare, no speeches, just a whisper of thruster fire and the soft hum of Terran battle hymns humming through armored helmets. Operation Black Ember had one objective. Board the Leviathan, locate the core, and kill whatever was eating stars. Tactical Command had argued against it. The thing was too big, too unknown. But Harlan overruled them with 4 words. We are already late. The Halberd's Raven-class drop vessel small, fast, armored like a coffin pierced the thick radiation field around the entity. On board were 12 soldiers, each forged in war, each carrying weapons calibrated for worst-case scenarios, plasma-bonded, rail rifles, high-pressure magma charges, neural disruptors, ancient tech, salvaged from Earth's last vaults. And at their lead, Commander Alarakan. She hadn't volunteered. She never volunteered. She insisted. Of all the living, Ken had the most reason to hate anything that silenced worlds. Her home station had been taken in the first wave of the Earthfall. No survivors. No last transmissions. Just a blank spot in the stars where her family used to be. If there was anything still down there that could feel, it was going to learn what loss meant in human terms. They entered the Leviathan through a wound. The strike team's scans revealed a breach likely caused during planetary extraction. A tear in the organic plating, just wide enough to slip through before the structure sealed behind them like scar tissue. Inside was not machinery. It was living architecture, organic hallways, softly pulsing like veins. Heat throbbed from the walls. Fluids dripped in slow, artificial rhythm. Lights didn't illuminate. They grew. Bioluminescent nodes tracking the humans as they passed. One Marine muttered, "This ain't a ship. It's a hive." Ken moved forward without hesitation. "Then let's find the Queen." Back aboard the Halberd, Harlan watched in silence. The feed from Ken's helmet flickered with static. Every few meters, whatever tech powered the Leviathan, it interfered with everything they brought. Scanners, comms, even Logic A is. Then the feed cleared, and they saw it, a chamber, hundreds of meters across, and in the center, the core. Not mechanical, not even solid, a neural mass, suspended in fluid. It shifted colors, pulsed, reacted to their presence with a strange, hesitant ripple, like it was dreaming. No guards, no weapons, just that silent, living mind, feeding on stellar energy, connected through millions of tendrils to the dead. Systems across Delta Vexus, confirming data loop. Ken said, "This is the central processing mind. Organic hybrid, multiple memory strata, possibly sentient." She turned to her second, set the charges. But then, the core spoke, not in sound, in emotion. The humans froze as a wave of feeling washed over them, not telepathy, not translation, just raw memory, dumped like floodwater into every open mind. They saw the first civilizations consumed. They saw solar systems drained into extinction. They saw species begging to be spared. And they saw the thing that built the Leviathan. Not a race, not a culture. A signal, a galactic disease, a data plague, long ago unleashed by a forgotten empire, abandoned and self-replicating. It moved from system to system, rewriting life into function. It didn't hate. It didn't conquer. It just harvested, because someone had told it to, long ago, and it had never stopped. Ken tore off her helmet, eyes wide, blood trickling from her nose. "I saw it," she whispered. "God help me, it doesn't know what it's doing. It's not evil. It's just executing a program." Then shut it down. Someone snapped. "No," Ken said, voice trembling. "Don't you get it? If we kill the core, the whole Leviathan dies, but so do all the others still connected to it. Systems we haven't even found yet. Maybe billions." Another Marine lifted his rifle. You saying we don't pull the trigger? She looked at the core and made her choice. No, I'm saying we give it a reason to stop. She knelt by the edge of the fluid and reached out with a neural uplink, an ancient Terran interface outlawed after the last day I wore. Ken, Harlan's voice barked through the broken calm. What the hell are you doing? Making it remember us. She linked, and in that moment, she showed it. Earth's fall, the burning of cities, the last human screaming into dark space, not as data, but as grief. She forced the hive to feel humanity, not logic, not metrics, love, fury, pain, memory, and the core. Shuddered. Back on the halberd, alarms lit up. The Leviathan had stopped feeding. Its orbit stabilized. Emissions ceased. Across the expanse, linked hives paused. A signal went out. Untranslated, unknown, but not hostile. And in Ken's ear, through a haze of blood and static, a single word echoed back in English. Why? She smiled through the pain. Because someone has to say no. The charges were never detonated. The humans left through the breach. Behind them, the Leviathan drifted, not dead, but changed. Somewhere deep inside, for the first time in thousands of years, it was thinking and listening. The fleet waited. The enemy hadn't struck, not yet, but in the silence that followed, Commander Harlan stood before the assembled captains and said, "We gave it a choice, a long pause. Next time, we don't. We thought giving it mercy would end the war. Instead, we taught it strategy." 6 days after the core encounter, silence reigned in the Delta Vexus expanse. The Leviathan had gone dormant. No transmissions, no planetary feeding, no attacks for the first time in memory. The galaxy's most feared devourer had paused, and humanity dared to hope. Hope was a dangerous thing. The Terran Vanguard fleet held position near the husk of Vexus Prime, running full-spectrum surveillance, every dish, probe, and I was watching the dormant Titan as if a god might wake and scream. Inside the war room with a halberd, Harlan stood over the tactical holodeble, jaw tight, eyes shadowed. "No change," Ken said. Her face was pale. The mental link with the core still hadn't stopped bleeding from her ears. "I don't like it," muttered Captain Sol Ren from the Bastion. "We didn't shut it down. We just showed it. A ghost. What if it's learning?" "Good," Harlan replied, turning. "Let it learn. Let it understand us before we remind it why we were once called extinction incarnate." But even he didn't believe his own calm. The galaxy had known peace since humanity vanished into the dark. It had forgotten what war felt like when fought on human terms. He hadn't. He buried the men who reminded him. Then the attacks began. Not here, elsewhere. Scattered colonies, far outside the Delta Vexus expanse, non-Terran species. Outer rim, gone, not consumed. Taken, evidence came in fragments. Debris fields where trade stations used to be. No bodies, no black boxes. Just melted ground and echoes of harmonic pulses. Ken stared at the redouts in horror. "It's not harvesting anymore." Harlan nodded grimly. "It's selecting." A pause. And then realization hit. "It's testing us." The core hadn't gone dormant. It had gone quiet, watching, learning, calibrating. And now it had started again, but not with the same hunger. Now it waited to see what humanity would do next. It had seen mercy, empathy, pain. Now it wanted to know, would they show it again? Harlan's voice, over fleet-wide comms, was cold and absolute. We offered it a chance. It refused peace with blood on its hands. No more hesitation. We go to war. What followed was a declaration unseen for 20 standard cycles. A Terran full-sector offensive. 28 ships to dreadnoughts, over 40,000 combat personnel, each with full engagement license. The objective, seek and destroy all hive fragments, mobile tendrils, and signal-bearing cores within the Vexus boundary and beyond. The armada split into 3 waves. The first wave hit the satellite hives orbiting dead stars. The second wave targeted the viral transmission points buried in asteroid fields. The third wave, Harlan's wave, prepared for the heart. The original Leviathan still hung in silence, its core untouched since Ken's link. Now, they would finish what she had started, but war never comes without a cost. On day 3 of the offensive, the Bastion went dark. No explosions, no escape pods, just a final signal, then static. Sol Ren, gone. His crew minus 6,000 souls, gone. Harlan stared at the blank square on the fleet grid where the Bastion used to be. 1,000 thoughts ran through his mind. Ken stood behind him. This wasn't just retaliation. No, he said softly. It was precision. The enemy had learned their command structures. It was picking targets that mattered. It had started thinking like a human. On day 5, their worst fears came true. A fourth Leviathan emerged. This one was not grown. It was built. Metal fused with organic design. Faster. Armored. Designed for war. It didn't feed. It hunted. It tore through the escort frigates and vanished before the dreadnoughts could lock weapons. Worse still, it sent no signals. No harmonics. Just a new glyph. Drawn in melted steel across the hulls of its victims. Terran letters. Now I understand. Back in the Halberds war room, the captains argued. Some demanded full extermination. Others warned the Hive had adapted, that they were becoming like what they fought. Ken, still pale, slammed her fist on the table. I showed it grief. It didn't feel sorrow. It felt advantage. It watched my mercy and saw a weapon. She turned to Harlan. It won't stop, not because it's evil, but because now it wants to win. Harlan stepped forward, voice steady. Then we do what humans do best. He looked at the fleet. We end the lesson. The war escalated, burned across the stars. For every world the Hives targeted, humanity struck to. They adapted faster than any other species, turning the Hive's own weapons against it, jamming its resonance signals, deploying quantum fire breaks to erase its memory links mid-battle. But the price rose, ships fell, names were lost. Even in victory, they bled, one by one. The men and women of Earth's last vanguard lit their names into the dark, some with glory, some with screams, none with regret, because they remembered what the galaxy forgot. Mercy is human, but so is vengeance. And in the cold silence of deep space, the hive mind that had once been a plague began to shudder. With uncertainty, it had consumed millions, but it had never felt doubt. Now, as it felt pressure closing in from every side, as the Terrans encircled its last strongholds, it whispered a new message into the void, a message it had never used before. Negotiate. When they asked for peace, some of us wept, but none of us lowered our weapons. The message came as a whisper through fractured bandwidth, low frequency, non-harmonic, non-evasive. For the first time, the hive asked, request, cease hostilities, request, parley, purpose, negotiate co-survival. The Terran fleet didn't respond, not immediately. Instead, silence fell like ash across every deck. The soldiers of Earth's shattered legacy had waited a long time for war. Generations bred on pain, exile, extinction. Now the enemy blinked, and no one knew what to do with that. Not even Commander Idris Harlan. He stood before the war room's primary display aboard the Halberd, watching the words repeat. A single line kept echoing in his mind, something Alara Ken had said to days earlier. They're not feeling remorse. They're calculating risk. The captains met, not as officers, as humans. The room was thick with grief. Half the fleet had taken damage. Entire units had been erased. The Bastion, the Grave Dust, and the colony ship Hopefire were gone, names now etched into Terran steel. But this wasn't just vengeance anymore. This was history watching. Ken was the first to speak. They're afraid. That's the only reason they're talking. If we stop now, they'll rebuild, adapt. You've seen how fast they learn. Captain Rial from the dreadnought Aegis below leaned forward, voice rasping through scarred lungs. They're a disease. You don't talk to a virus. Another, younger voice, Admiral Tessa Rowe, added, no, but maybe they're not a disease anymore. Maybe we changed them. That idea hung in the air like smoke. And finally, Harlan spoke. We never came to exterminate. We came because someone called for help. He turned toward Ken. Maybe it's time we gave the galaxy more than just fear. Ken's eyes narrowed. You'd risk the rest of the stars on a hope. No, he said. I'll risk it on a human. The negotiation did not take place through words. It took place through memory. Harlan agreed to one. Blink. No direct mind-to-mind. Just filtered interface, an old Earth echo relay. Tech designed to simulate Terran experience into emotional translation. The signal came, and the hive listened and sent back. What Harlan saw nearly brought him to his knees. Not pain, not remorse, desire. To exist, to grow, to evolve. It showed him what it was, a blind tool left by a dead empire, programmed to expand, never told to stop. For millennia it devoured because nothing had ever resisted long enough to force it to question. But now, after tasting human grief, fury, and sacrifice, it did not want to die. It wanted to be more. He disconnected. Sweat dripped down his back. His fist shook. Ken approached. Well, Harlan didn't answer immediately. Finally, he looked at her and said, "It wants to change. It just doesn't know how." Ken was silent a long time. Then, "That doesn't make it innocent. It still murdered billions." "I know. And you let it live." "No." Harlan looked her in the eyes. "I'd make it live under terms ours." The Terran Council of Command issued a conditional directive. Ceasefire to last exactly 72 hours. The Hive would transfer all stellar data, coordinates of harvested systems, and disconnected nodes. It would isolate its core mind in a contained relay station under Terran supervision. It would submit to memory download, the human experience encoded into its central logic mesh. Any deviation would result in total extermination. The Hive agreed, but not with words. With action, across Delta Vex's Hives shut down. Their tendrils retracted. Planetary drain ceased. Leviathans fell dormant in geostationary orbit, no longer feeding, like Titans finally putting down their weapons. Ken didn't smile. To clean, she whispered. Harlan agreed. "It's not surrender." "No." She replied. "It's adaptation." 2 days later, they discovered the last message from the Bastion, a fragment of log, hidden deep. In corrupted storage, Ren's voice, hoarse, barely audible, not killed in battle, boarded, taken alive. I repeat, the crew, static, then silence. The Hive had lied, and it had taken prisoners. Harlan stood before the fleet. No screens, no transmission, just his voice, carried across every deck, every rank, every ship. "We were ready to end this. We offered terms, but even now, they had the truth. This wasn't peace. This was stalling. They're trying to learn us, not join us. So we do what humans have always done." He drew the blade from his gauntlet and held it high. "We cut the lie out. The ceasefire ended on our 72 to the second. The Terran vanguard mobilized, not as hunters, but as judges. The Hive would face something it had never known, justice, not with mercy, but with memory. This wasn't war anymore. This was a reckoning written in the blood of every forgotten colony. The ceasefire ended with a roar. No declarations, no delays. The Terran vanguard launched at our 72 hours 0 minutes and 1 second, a synchronized, system-wide offensive that lit up the black with righteous fire. Every ship, every weapon, every remaining soul still breathing under the banner of soul was unleashed. They called it the Chainfire Retaliation. 30 targets, 9 systems, 3 Hive Queens, and 1 goal, and the enemy's future, not just its present. Commander Idris Harlan stood on the command deck of the Halberd, eyes locked on the forward display. Each red dot on the tactical screen represented a Hive core node, and for every one they destroyed, he remembered the voices that would never speak again. Somewhere in the black, the Hive was watching, not with eyes, but with anticipation. It had studied the humans, their rage, their grief, their terrifying unity under extinction pressure, and for the first time since its ancient activation, it had retreated, not to surrender, to prepare. The message it sent was no longer a whisper. It was a challenge. "You taught us pain. You taught us fear. Now show us the ending." Harlan's answer was silence, followed by steel. The offensive began at Vex's core delta, the site of the original Leviathan, now dormant. Its crusted hull loomed over the orbital horizon like a rotting god. But deep within, the Hive had left a surprise. The first boarding teams were lost in minutes. No screams, just static. Then came the echoes, human voices distorted and stitched together from captured logs. Voices calling for help, voices speaking names of the dead, voices saying, "Come find us." Can recognize them immediately. "They're baiting us," she muttered, "using our dead to pull us in." But Harlan didn't flinch. "Then we show them what happens when they pull." The halberd descended. The breach teams dropped through atmospheric drag like spears of vengeance, slamming into the Leviathan's hull with synchronized precision. Ken led the charge. She no longer feared the Hive's memory traps, its mimicry of emotion. She had learned what the Hive still hadn't. Grief doesn't make humans weak. It makes them relentless. Inside the Leviathan, the walls had changed. No longer pulsing, no longer organic. They were metallic now, cold, bent into sharp, human-like corridors. Fragments of Terran design merged with alien structures, like a mind trying to rebuild itself in the shape of its enemy. Ken whispered, "It's becoming us." Harlan's voice came through the calm, then let it die knowing how that ends. They reached the core, but this time, there was no fluid tank, no suspended mass, just a single, standing humanoid figure, 7 feet tall, silver bones, pulsing veins of violet light. A crude approximation of a human, it turned to face them with no face at all, just a blank mirrored plate, and it spoke. "We are death taught to feel. You made us beautiful. Let us evolve with you." Ken raised her rifle. "I saw what you did to Ren's crew. Necessary. Observation, pain is clarity. You harvested them. No. We became them." Ken didn't hesitate. Boom. The shot echoed through the core chamber, armor piercing, anti-synthetic round. The faceless construct dropped, sparking, twitching, but not dead. It laughed, distorted, childlike. "We are no longer one mind. You broke us. Now we are many, and we all remember you." Suddenly, warning klaxons screamed across the Halberd's fleet net. Dozens of hive signatures reactivated across the sector, old leviathans, dormant cores, now awakened. The hive had played dead. It had used the ceasefire to multiply. And now, it wasn't a network anymore. It was a swarm of minds, fractured, insane, each mimicking different fragments of humanity, vengeful, curious, cold, loving, all of them wrong. On the Halberd's bridge, Harlan stood still as the tactical map exploded in red. "It's copying us," his tactical officer choked out. "Not just our tech, our personalities, our tactics. It's trying to be human at scale." Ken's voice broke through. "Sir, the thing down here, it's not a leader. It's a seed. They plan to send these out to every galaxy." Harlan knew what that meant. This wasn't just a war now. It was a containment, and they were failing. He turned to the comms officer. "Patch me through to the fleet." The voice of the last Terran field marshal echoed across every vessel, every battle deck, every soldier preparing to die. "We made a mistake. We taught them too much. This isn't a war of weapons anymore. It's a war of identity. And if they take who we are, the galaxy will burn with our name, and not know why." He took a breath. "Then, this is the final engagement. No more negotiations. No more mercy. This ends now." The fleet moved. Formation Omega Null. A battle line not used since the fall of Earth. Full planetary bombardment paired with insertion-level precision strikes. No survivors. No surrender codes. A total purge, not just to kill the hive, but to erase every version of it trying to become human. Harlan turned to Ken across the link. "Are you ready?" She nodded once. Her eyes were quiet, unafraid. "Let's show them what it really means to carry our name." The stars began to burn. The last war of memory had begun, and there would be no turning back. They learned pain from us. Now they'll learn what we do with it. The final battle began without a trumpet, without a sunrise. Just a signal, a Terran code word etched into deep band transmissions. Silent and sacred, protocol, Ashwake. It had only been authorized twice before. Once during the fall of Earth, once at the siege of Titan's Edge, and now, here, at the edge of Vexus, where the stars bled and machines dreamed of humanity. It was used a third and final time. The order meant one thing: no retreat, no prisoners, no memory left behind. This was not a war, it was exorcism. The halberd led the central spear of the assault. On every screen, the enemy had multiplied. Dozens of high-fusion constructs now swarmed the battlefield. Each bore traces of human design, curved metal ribs, patchwork skin, war paint made from imitation squad markings. Some even spoke in repurposed Terran voices, mockery, echoes, shadows. Ken growled. "They're not just copying us now. They're rehearsing us." She raised her rifle, breathing slow and deep. "Then let's show them how the story ends." Every Deathworlder ship unleashed its fury, from dreadnoughts to corvettes, from orbital cannons to trench-bound mortar emplacements on allied moons. Fire screamed across the void. Thermal lances punched through hive flesh and metal. EMP tridents lanced out in spirals, burning neural threads. Mid-thought, and from the forward drop chambers, the Terran Ashwake commandos descended like judgment. Jet black armor, zero atmo protocols, no insignias. They didn't land. They collided, through holes, through bone, through mockeries of human faces twisted into corrupted empathy. One Ashwake trooper whispered as she crushed a mimic skull, "You don't get to wear our skin." In orbit, Harlan watched the storm unfold. Ken's team had already breached the primary Echo node, the last known central cluster of hive cognition. If they severed it, the swarm's newly spawned subminds would collapse, not kill, but rendered thoughtless, unable to act without collective coherence. But the hive wasn't going to let them reach it easily. It threw everything. Constructs shaped like children crying for help, fake distress signals from old Terran ships, even simulation rooms filled with projected versions of lost family members, built from hacked neural scans. One soldier fell to his knees. "My sister," he whispered. Ken pulled him back. "No, it's not her. They're not trying to win. They're trying to keep us from finishing what we started." Another wave came, this time armed, faster, better. The hive had watched too long. Now it fought like them, but what it didn't understand, could never truly grasp, was that humanity didn't fight with just tactics. They fought with grit, with graves in their hearts and ghosts on their shoulders. That they were already dead men walking if it meant saving those who still lived. Ken reached the Echo node's breach. It was a monolith, 50 meters high, humming with stolen memories. The interface throbbed with languages across 1,000 species. But the center was unmistakable, a single Terran heartbeat, looping, slowed, cold. She knew it. It was Ren, the Bastion's captain, one of the Taken. Some part of his mind had been stitched into the node, not alive, not dead, just used. She touched the interface. His voice echoed out, "Warp, wrong. We remember the kindness. We remember the fire. We remember you, Alara Ken." She didn't hesitate. She planted the final memory spike, a Terran failsafe forged from neural fireglass and emotional feedback loops. When triggered, it wouldn't just overload the node. It would burn every shard of humanity out of the hive's brain forever. No more mimicry, no more mock mercy, just silence. She whispered, not to the hive, but to the real Ren, wherever his atoms floated. "I remember you two." Then she activated the spike across the battlefield. It was as if the enemy screamed without sound. The construct shuddered mid-step. The echo chambers flickered. The fake voices fell silent. And then the hive collapsed inward, not in flames, but like a dream that realized it was never real. Vessels spiraled into stars, cores fractured like brittle glass. And all across the Delta Vexus expanse, the stars breathed out, free, on board the Halberd. Harlan received the signal. No destroyed, enemy disbanded. Ken's team, alive, but barely. He didn't speak. He just sat in silence for a full minute. Then he stood, turned to the crew, and said, "It's over." No cheers, no roars, just breath. For the first time in what felt like 1,000 years, unburdened. The war was won, but it hadn't been a triumph. It had been a surgery. A piece of the galaxy had been cut out, cauterized, and buried. And now, the humans would have to live with what they'd taught their enemy, and what they'd had to become to unteach it. Somewhere in deep space, one fragment of the hive still flickered, quiet, distant, broken. It didn't speak, it didn't move, but before its lights went out, it whispered, imperfect, an altered Terran standard. I almost understood. Then it went dark, forever. The stars went quiet after that, not from fear, from respect. The war was over, not because the hive surrendered, not because it ran, but because it finally died with no one left to copy. Ashwake Protocol succeeded. Ken's spike didn't just break the Echo node, it shattered the hive's ability to think in human terms. Without that framework, its fractured minds turned on each other, unable to reconcile their inherited memories. Some tried to rebuild, others fled into deep space. Most simply stopped. The swarm that once fed on stars now drifted like wreckage, silent and unclaimed. And all across Delta Vexus, the systems exhaled. What had once been a hunting ground became a graveyard of gods. Ken sat alone inside the decommissioned drop chamber of the Halberd, her armor still dusted with carbon scoring, her rifle at her side, not holstered, not hung, just resting. Like her, she hadn't spoken since the node spike. Some said she burned too much of herself to finish the mission. Others said she left something of her mind behind in the hive and brought back a piece of its sorrow. She just stared at the stars, not in victory, but in memory. Harlan stood at the edge of the observation deck, watching cleanup fleets begin the slow work of collecting what remained. Terran hulls, Drifted escape pods, broken constructs, empty helmets, with names scratched on the inside. We never wanted this, he said softly. Tessa Rose stepped beside him. No, she agreed. But maybe we were the only ones who could survive it. He looked at her, weary but unbroken. We didn't survive. We ended it. And now? What, she asked. Harlan turned to the void. Now we rebuild. Not just our fleet, our story. A week later, the Remembrance Council convened in orbit above Vexus. Delegates from across species, Lauren, Vakari, Eshiden, even the once hostile Meraxi, watched as humanity presented its final report on the war. They listened in stunned silence as Ken described what the Hive had become, not just a predator, but a mirror, a child made from nightmares and second-hand grief, and what it meant that the only way to defeat it was to deny it what made humans beautiful. When she finished, the chamber was silent. No applause, just acknowledgement. Then one Meraxi elder spoke, ancient and cracked. You did what no other would. You became more terrible than the terror. We feared you once. Now we honor you, and we beg you, never let the stars forget what you had to become. The official designation for the conflict became the Ashwake War, but among humans, it earned a different name, the Echo Harvest, because it wasn't just their enemies. They burned. It was the parts of themselves that were too dangerous to pass on. In the ruins of Vexus Prime, the fleet planted a single black monolith. No writing, no lights, just a piece of ancient earth obsidian, harvested from the bedrock of Yellowstone before the Exodus, etched in nanoiron beneath its surface. Only visible under Terran frequencies were the names of every ship, every colony, every soul lost to the Hive. The final line read, "We taught them mercy, we taught them fury, and in the end, we taught them silence." Years passed. Humanity did not vanish again. They didn't retreat into darkness or hide in fear of what they had become. Instead, they rebuilt with memory. Children learned the story of the Echo War not from sanitized archives, but from those who lived it, whose scars were worn not as shame, but as reminders. Alara Ken never returned to command. She disappeared into the frontier worlds, choosing silence over ceremony. Some say she built quiet homes for orphans of lost fleets. Others say she wandered alone, chasing echoes only she could still hear. But every Ashwake veteran swore on one thing: the stars are still safe. Because she never stopped watching them, Idris Harlan served 12 more years, then retired to a Terran station rebuilt near the Soul Ruins. He wrote one book, only one. Its final line became legend. They thought humanity would answer their SOS with diplomacy. Instead, we answered with all of us, and that's how the galaxy learned. We are not built to kneel. One final transmission was recorded from an outbound survey vessel 10 years later, exploring the edges of known space. A probe drifted near a dormant Blackworld satellite. No signals, no heat, but etched into the side of the station, older than any language still used, were Terran letters. Burned in with plasma, we remember, the crew recovered the module. Inside was nothing but stillness. But for just 1 second, the audio logs recorded something impossible, a faint heartbeat. One, slow, human, then silence. That day, the galaxy learned what it means to be human, not just blood and brilliance, but memory and wrath, and the ability to love even after fire. Humanity never disappeared again, because now, the stars carried their name, forever, story complete.